The NASCAR NextGen Cup Car has now been on the iRacing platform for about a full season and a half. Now, wrapping up its first full season, there's a lot of people that have been coming to me asking me if I know anything or how I can help them, just different types of stuff when it comes to the NextGen Cup Car. Now, I actually went online and did some research myself because I wanted to see if there was anything out there that I could point people to until I started this video series. And shockingly enough, there's not a lot of information online about this car. Now, when you actually think about it, that's not too surprising considering the fact that this is not the car used in the NIS series. It's not the car used in the Pro series right now. And so a lot of people are just not messing with it. But heading into 2022, this will be the NIS car and this will be the car in the Pro series. So it's now a good time to start learning about these things, and that's what this video series is gonna do. So in today's video, we're gonna dive in and start breaking down the NextGen Cup Car, and I'm gonna be going over the 6 things that you need to know about. Yes, there are a ton of things on here that are important, but these are really the 6 main things that I think you need to know about going forward in this video series. So with all of that being said, let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Thomas Brandon here. Thank you very much as always for joining me. And like I said, we're going to be covering the 6 things that I think are the most important that you need to know with the NextGen Cup Car. Now keep in mind, this will be a video series just like we did on the super late model, where I'll be breaking down different aspects, showing you how I built setups with it, and then also the different things and what they do and when and why to adjust them, so that way you've got a good foundation to work with over the next couple of months if you want to, so you can go into 2022 much more prepared than other people. Now, no doubt when you got this car and you opened up the garage and saw this, your first reaction was probably, "What the?" But although this definitely looks overwhelming and extremely confusing, we're going to be breaking down all this stuff in this video series. And like I said, I'm going to be covering the 6 main things that you need to know about today. Now, all of these are not garage related adjustments. There are a couple of different things, particularly some comparisons to the Gen 6 car, which are really important because this thing is so different, it's not even funny. So with all of that being said, let's get started. Number 1, insane downforce. Now, if we look at the downforce on the Gen 6 Cup Car and we look at the downforce on the NextGen Cup Car, it is incredibly different. Now, what you're looking at is the Motec telemetry of the Gen 6 Cup Car. What I did was I took both cars, I ran laps at Las Vegas, I ran laps at Iowa. I used the iRacing fixed setup, so that way there would be no setup difference in terms of the downforce, or at least I could get as close as I could using the iRacing setups. And then I compared them. Now, keep in mind, downforce is a very complex formula, so it's not just something like you just measure X and then compare it to Y. It's not like that. It's very, very complex. In order to calculate downforce, okay, just if we look at the nose, because I calculate downforce on the nose and on the spoiler. What we do is we have to get a measurement of the actual nose. You need to know the actual area, the surface area of what you're measuring the downforce for. You need to know the angle of attack. You need to have that in radians. You need to then figure out the difference between what should be the downforce and then the dynamic downforce. So for example, we have this huge grill that's open right here. This does not create downforce. This creates drag. Now on the next gen car, or excuse me, on the Gen 6 car, you actually can run tape there. So I have to factor that in as well. Okay, now we do the same thing on the spoiler where we measure the surface area, we do all this stuff, then we put it all into these formulas, and for each part of the car, just for the front, I think there's 3 or 4 different formulas that must be calculated and then put all together in a very complex calculation to measure the downforce. It's a very lengthy process, but That being said, I do calculate. Now, keep in mind, this is the way that I calculate it. It's based on the dimensions that I got and the scaling that I did. I am not saying that these are accurate to real world or that they're even accurate to what iRacing has for the downforce. I'm just saying in my world that I measure them, okay, which seems to be pretty accurate to me and it works well for me. When I compare the Gen 6 car to the next gen car, they are very different. So, if we look at the the Gen 6 car, I'm going to keep screwing that up. If we look at the Gen 6 car at Las Vegas, okay, we ran 5 laps. And I did that for a reason I didn't want tire wear to be a problem. We ran 5 laps, and the Gen 6 car is generating, okay, in terms of downforce. If we look down here, the dynamic nose and dynamic rear, which is more important because this actually factors in the drag, so how low the front is, and also how much of the air dam, the grill, is taped off. It takes all those things into consideration. We were generating on average 1,577 pounds of force on the nose. Okay, this is the Gen 6 car, and 831 pounds of force on the spoiler. All right, when we go to the next gen car, we were generating 2,790 pounds of force on the nose and 607 pounds of force on the spoiler. That is a huge difference. You're talking about a difference of literally 1,000 pounds of force on the nose and losing 200 pounds of force on the spoiler. This is why that car at Vegas, for example, you can just run it wide open. Right? You can just run it wide open on the 1.5 miles. Now, once tires start to wear off, it's going to be a different story. But the thing is because these cars generate so much downforce, the tire wear on the super speedways is not as much as it is with the Gen 6 car. They don't wear off the tires as much. On the Gen 6 car, the tire wear was already down after 5 laps to 99 on the left and 98 on the right. And I was running the car very hard. The next gen car, they were also at 100. And I was running it wide open. So it's going to play a factor. And obviously, we don't have the packages yet. And that's something to keep in mind. Because we haven't gotten the packages from NASCAR, because NASCAR doesn't even have the packages yet, we don't know exactly how much downforce we're going to lose or how much horsepower and things like that. We don't know if they're going to be messing with that stuff for the next gen car. I imagine they would, but we don't know if they are yet. So this is as of right now. But what I can tell you is right now, this car generates a ton more downforce. And it's not just on the big tracks. Let's take a look at a small track. So here at Iowa, which is, about a mile track, a little less, we've got 8 on the Gen 6 car. We've got 872 pounds on average of downforce on the nose. Or excuse me, 878. I got to look at the dynamic. 878 pounds of downforce on the nose with 482 pounds of downforce on the spoiler. That's for the Gen 6 car at Iowa. Now, when we look at the next gen car at Iowa, we've got 1,585 on the nose. When you calculate downforce, your velocity comes into play. The more speed that you are carrying, the more downforce you are generating. All right? This track, Iowa, it's not a fast track. So for the next gen car to be generating more downforce on the nose at Iowa than the Gen 6 car generates at Vegas, that's a lot. Okay? Not only that, the rear spoiler downforce drops off considerably. It's almost cut in half. It's at 360 pounds on the next gen car at Iowa, where I forgot to look at Vegas. Where at Vegas, we had 600 pounds on the rear spoiler. So you're still having a significant amount of downforce on the nose and very little on the rear spoiler. This has led the car on the short tracks to snap around on a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people message me and say, hey man, this thing keeps wanting to spin out on me. And that's a lot of that has to do with the downforce. Not only that, it has to do with number 2, which is inconsistent tire wear. So like I said just a minute ago, when we were at Vegas, the tire wear on the Gen 6 car had gone down like 1% on the right sides and 2% on the left sides after only 5 laps. The next gen car, it went down 0. But when we went to Iowa and tested, and keep in mind, we were only running 5 laps. For the Gen 6 car, you had 99% on the right side and basically 100 on the left rear and 99 on the left front. But the next gen car, after just 5 laps, you saw a much bigger drop off where you were at 96 on the right front, 98 on the right rear, and then 98 on the left sides. Keep in mind, this setup is an iRacing setup. It's a little more tight, so it's going to burn up the right front. I was pushing these cars very hard, but when I was building my setup for Iowa, even with my setup that I built to be a much more loose setup and run well over the course of a long run, it's still burning up these tires at a much faster rate. The tire wear that I've been seeing, for example, at the smaller tracks, but Iowa, Richmond, even like something like Darlington, is way more than what you're seeing on like the Gen 6 and the Xfinity car. Now, I don't know whether or not that has to do with the setup, if it's just if there's a different kind of tire on the next gen car, I don't know. But I've been noticing that the tire wear is very different. The shorter tracks, it seems to be really rapid, where the bigger tracks where you are just stuck, just sucked down because of all that downforce, it's almost non-existent. So it's going to be interesting to see how it is going forward. But what I will tell you is on the shorter tracks, if you're using the brake and having to get in and out of that throttle a lot, your tire wear is going to be a crucial factor, because these things seem to fall off fast. Number 3, Diff Preload. Now, this has all kinds of people confused, and I can kind of understand why, but I'll explain it to you like this, and this is the easiest way to understand the differential preload. Think of differential preload as stagger, okay? So when you have stagger, if you think about the super late model videos that we did, last week, if you think about stagger is the difference between the size of the right rear tire and the left rear tire. The bigger the right rear in comparison to the left rear, the more the car is going to want to naturally turn when you're on throttle. So stagger is one of those things where on throttle, it's got more oversteer, right? The car rotates more. Off throttle, it has more understeer. This differential preload is the same thing. The higher this number, the more the car is going to want to rotate on throttle. The higher the number, it's also going to want to rotate less off throttle. Okay, so it really reacts like stagger. Now, obviously, it's different in the sense that this is the differential in the rear end. It's not the difference in the tires, the sizing of the tires, but the principles of it, right, in terms of what it does, are basically the same. So that's the easiest way to think about it. Now, this we'll dive into a whole lot more when we get into the setup aspects in the coming videos. But what I have found with the differential preload is this is really more of a track specific adjustment. And what I mean by that is if you think about the adjustments we had on the super late model that were track dependent, right? Gear, caster, camber, right? Those types of things. The diff preload is kind of the same thing for me so far. So on the much bigger tracks, I'm not running very much preload, if at all. On the smaller tracks, where I want this thing to rotate more with the throttle, I am running more preload. So it's really, to me, a track specific adjustment. Now, you may find that you just don't even like it and you keep it at 0. And from everything that I have seen, you can absolutely do that because there's no punishment for it. All right. And what I mean by that is you're not gaining some crazy amount of speed if you don't use this. I've tested this ad nauseum. I've done every single one at a bunch of different tracks. And what I found is that it's all about comfort. Now, that being said, let me reiterate this point because we just talked about the tire wear. One thing that I did notice is that if you are running a lot of diff preload and you're at a track, let's say Iowa, for example, and you're burning up your right side tires, when those tires get down, when they start getting into the 80s, if you got a lot of preload, that car is gonna spin out on you. So that is something to consider. Okay. This is what I think I have found for me that works the best for preload, okay, is qualifying situations. That's what I've been really playing with this. So yes, I do use it in the race setups, but where I really find myself using this at the extremes is qualifying. Because what you can do with this is you can really hook the car up, really get it tight, because we don't care about tire wear in qualifying, right? We got 2 laps. So get the car to where it's just stuck to the track and stable, and then you can actually use this diff preload to help rotate the car on throttle. So that's what I've been doing with this, and it seems to work really well. Keep in mind, I've been doing it in testing situations. I have only raced this car not very much, okay, like a handful of times, but I've been doing a ton of testing on it. Just in the last 2 days, I've probably done close to 20 hours worth of testing in the last 2 days on the next gen car. So that's the situations that I've been finding for it. Now, like I said, for you, it could be different, but for me, that's what seems to be working best. Okay. Number 4, stiffer front springs are definitely a plus. Now, on the Gen 6 car, on the Gen 6 car, for example, a lot of the setups that I would build for that car, and I don't build that many for them because it's going away after the end of this year in terms of the official series. Yes, I'm sure people will still run it, but it'll be going away in terms of the official series, being the main car, right? The NIS and stuff like that, the Pro Series. Now, in those cars, basically you just like max out everything on the front end, right? Like your shock springs are like, I run like 6,000 pound shock springs. My front springs are anywhere from, my front corner springs are anywhere from like 7,000 to 10,000. Like the front end is very stiff, and then you drop that thing down. The ARB is stiff. Like the whole front end is just stiff. Okay. And it usually feels pretty good. What I've found on this car is that the principle seems to be the same, but you can't go as high. The front springs max out at 4,500. Now, the reason why I think stiffer feels better is because of all the downforce you've got on the nose of this car. So when I soften up these front springs below, like, oh man, probably 2,000, the front end just feels flimsy. Now, this has been an adjustment for me with this car, or I shouldn't say with this car, because it's just been an adjustment in terms of the Cup car. The Gen 6 car was the only car I ran like that. The trucks, the Xfinity car, the super late models, all the other ones that have got the more traditional stuff on it, as opposed to this, I run a stiff bar soft spring combination, right? Like the Xfinity car, my front springs, on the corner are never above 400 pounds, like never. Okay. Now the shock springs, I'll run anywhere from, 3,000 to like 7,000 or 6,000 on those things. Like those will vary, but the corner springs are usually pretty soft. Here, because we don't have the shock springs, I've been doing much stiffer springs on this front end, and I've been doing much different bar combinations. Now, keep in mind, there's only 2 bars that you can run. You've got a 1 3/4, a 1.375, excuse me, and then a 2-inch bar. Like those are your 2 options, and that's it. Now you can obviously change up the feel of it with the ARB arm because you have 5 variations of that, but you've only got the 2 bars in the front and in the rear. That's it. It's not like it used to be where you could run everything from like a 1.5 to a 2.5 or something like that. So the front springs seem to feel much better stiff. Now keep in mind, I tested it with them soft, and if you can get the ride heights correct, the car will still work. It'll still be fast. I actually laid down very consistent lap times compared to the stiff springs. It just didn't feel very good to me. Okay, and that's the thing. This car, because we just talked about the tire wear, feeling good is absolutely crucial. Like it really is. And so for me, I like the stiffer springs, and they seem to work much, much better. So that's what I've been going with. But as always, like I say, do what feels best to you. But I would start off stiff just because of all the testing. It seems to be a little bit more consistent. So try the stiffer springs and then go down from there. Number 5, Drastic rear spring split is back. Now, when I say it's back, I mean for me. If you look at some of the iRacing setups on the truck or the Xfinity car, they run some pretty drastic rear spring split. Like you'll have like a 2,000 pound right rear spring and like a 400 pound left rear spring. For me, one of the things that I've done is I basically, if you remember the super late model video, I do the same principles in the other cars, the truck and the Xfinity, is I pretty much put the stiffest left rear spring that I can in that car or close to it. Like I think the stiffest that you can go in the Xfinity is what, 800 pounds. I'm usually around 700 to 750, somewhere right around there. And then I build my other springs around that. With this, I use the same principle, but I'm not nearly as stiff. The left rear spring, as of right now, will max out at 1,500 pounds, okay? I actually ran that. It felt pretty good, but the right rear spring that I needed to run to get this car to feel good was so stiff that after a few laps, the car is just wanting to spin out. So massive spring split definitely helps. It makes the car feel much better. It makes it handle and respond much better. But the difference is that you've really got to figure out what's going to be good over the long run. You could go out and run 10 laps. You're like, man, that feels really good. But when you go run 30 laps, you're like, man, I can't keep this thing straight. So figuring out the spring split that you need and then nailing that left rear spring, getting that thing really dialed in so the car's not snapping on you and you're not burning off the right rear is really, really important. Now, we'll get more into this when we build the setup, okay? When I actually walk you through the process of building it. But just know that running the springs like we used to in the rear, or at least I did, those days seem to be gone, at least on the Cup side of things. Number 6, and our last one, which we saved the best and obviously most confusing, as for most people, for last, and that is shocks matter a ton. Now, for years on the trucks, the Xfinity cars, heck, even a lot of the short track cars, the Gen 6 car, what you would find is most people just maxed out the shocks. So you could turn the shocks to the maximum setting, leave it, and you could have a good car. Now, keep in mind, for me, I have been adjusting my shocks and fine-tuning them because it feels better to me. But I know that if I can't get my shocks to feel the way that I want them to, that I can just max them out and I'll have a car that'll be decent, that'll be pretty good, okay? You see this a lot. You just, the settings, it's just 32 over 32 or 18 over 18, whatever the maximum is, that's what people run. Those days are gone with these shocks. They are. These are obviously, as you can see, 6-way adjustable shocks. You've got low speed compression and rebound. You've got high speed compression and rebound. That's 4. And then you've got the slopes. Okay, you've got the high speed rebound slope and the high speed compression slope. And what this does is this creates a situation where the level of fine, even though you can only go 1 to 10, right? You've only got 10 settings for each adjustment. But this creates a level of adjustment, a level of fine tuning that was unachievable with the other shocks. Not only that, it matters. If you change the low speed compression on the shock, if you go from a 3 to a 4, guess what? It matters. It makes a difference. It's not like they used to be, where it's like, man, I kind of can't feel these things. No, you can feel these things. And knowing these shocks is very important because they're going to be putting these shocks on the Xfinity car and the trucks. Now, on the Xfinity, they're only going to be 5-way adjustable, and the trucks, they're only going to be 4-way adjustable. But these things are important. They really, really are. Now, we're going to do, when we talk about this, when we build the setup, I'm going to do a specific video just for the shocks, okay, because they're that important. I'm going to actually bust out a dyno sheet and explain to you what the slope does, what the difference between a digressive and a linear shock and all those things, because that stuff matters. And iRacing makes mention of it here in the notes. In the notes, if you look at this, the slope of the compression damping curve is used in conjunction with the dampening level to adjust the dampening curve. Low slope combined with high level produces very digressive curves that control the aero platform and suit large curb strikes. High slope and low level produces linear curves that are typically better or suit bumpier tracks, okay? Most of you probably just heard that and are thinking, what the hell are they talking about? Well, I'm going to cover all that when we do the deep dive in the shock video because there's so much information here. It can't be done in this video. It just can't. Just understand that the shocks are really, really important now. Okay, it's not a just max them out and call it good. You can't do that. You really can't, because I tried. I really did. You can't do it. You've got to fine tune these things, and we're going to cover that, how I do it. Yes, I do use Motec to fine tune the shocks. It saves me a ton of time than just going out and trial and error. But I'll show you how to do that, because that is actually something that you can do. You don't need any complex formulas. Motec actually has the suspension histogram. It's for free, and I'll actually kind of break down how to do that. All right, but yeah, shocks, crazy important. And if you run Xfinity or trucks, start learning these shocks, because they're going to those cars starting this coming season, which is in literally like a week and a half. So really, really important. And I actually like the fact that they are so important, because I thought it kind of sucked that you could just max out the shocks and call it good. Those days are gone, which is awesome in my opinion. All right, everybody, so that's gonna do it. I know I didn't actually get out there and drive or anything like that, but I just wanted to kind of break that stuff down, because like I said, those things are just have been really, really important, and all the testing and stuff that I've been doing, those are really the 6 things that keep kind of coming to the surface, right? You know, getting the stiffer springs for me on the front, the diff preload, the rear spring split, the aero is huge, the tire wear, and then also the shocks. Those 6 things are like the 6 main things that I have noticed. And so I wanted to share those with you, because like I said, I've had a ton of people asking me for help with this car, and because they're just lost. And like I said, when you pull up this garage and look at it, you could absolutely just be like, what the? So yeah, hopefully this helps some today. And like I said, we'll be getting into a whole lot more of this stuff in depth as we go through the setup guide, and it'll be a multi-part series just like we had with the super late models, where I'll actually hop in the car, do some adjustments, show you what I'm looking for, how I adjust it, when I adjust it, those types of things. So that way you will have at least a way to take a setup and adjust it to feel better for you, or build your own from the ground up, whatever it is that you want. But that'll do it. Now, really quick before I go, please do me a favor. If you like this, hit that like button. Also, make sure to share it and subscribe. Get it out there to other drivers. There's a lot of people who would like to know this information on the next gen car, because there's just not a lot out there. And like I said before, that's understandable. It's not the primary cup car, so a lot of people are just not paying attention to it. But of course, that's going to cause a lot of confusion at the start of 2022. And we're going to see kind of what we're seeing now, where it's like people are running the fixed stuff and no one's running the open. And also the fixed numbers have the participation has even gone down, because a lot of people are having trouble just driving these dang things. They don't even know how they're supposed to be driving them. So get this out there, share it with people, so we can increase these numbers. Because like I said, this car is actually pretty fun. It really is. On the bigger tracks, it's like, Michigan now is like Talladega and Daytona, right? I mean, even Vegas, you're just holding it wide open. Now, when you're in the draft and stuff, that'll be different. But, it is a pretty fun car. I do enjoy it. The more I've driven it, the more it's really grown on me. I really like it. So get this out there so we can help as many people as possible. Also, if you want to actually get free setups for this, I'll be posting free baseline setups for this upcoming season whenever the schedule is released, so that way you guys have got something that you can take out and use if you don't want to buy setups or build your own. Those will be on the website over the next coming weeks, and like I said, they'll be free. Plus we've got a ton of other free setups for everything on the dirt, minus street stocks and legends. I don't drive those damn things. But also, other cars, super late models, the Xfinity, the truck. I do have a lot of free stuff on there that you can use. Plus custom suits, custom helmets, just all kinds of stuff, man. Setup guides, everything. We've got a ton of free stuff. So if you want to check any of that out, or join our Discord community, which I've said before, I think is the best sim racing community online today. Of course, I am biased. Head over to schoolofsimracing.net. I'll have a link down in the description below, and you can check all that stuff out. But that'll do it. Thank you very much, as always, for joining me. Until next time, I want to wish you good luck, good racing. Take care.